Hey everybody, I'm the Crimson Scythe, and if you didn't know, Pikmin is one of my favourite video game franchises of all time. Yes, on the surface, this game may not look that interesting or even challenging, but make no mistake. The full games from the series focus on a real-time strategy-like genre, where you plan your next action and hope that nothing goes to crap. Pikmin 1 was more on a time limit, only having up to 30 days to collect all 30 ship parts. If you're not successful, then you would get the bad ending. Obtain 25 of the 30 and you would get the neutral ending, and if you get all 30 you would get the perfect ending. However, in Pikmin 2, it was more lenient, having no maximum on the days you spend on good old PNF 404, which is the planet of the Pikmin, I guess. Your goal is to collect treasure to pay off your company's debts going around the 4 areas of the game: the Valley of Repose, the Awakening Wood, the Perplexing Pool, and the Wistful Wild. Each of the 4 areas have caves or dungeons that need to be tackled to progress the game. All of them are mandatory for 100% completion of the game. There are 14 unique dungeons scattered across the game. Each has its own unique treasure, all but one have its own boss, and some have themes behind them. I'll be ranking these dungeons with personal bias, and just so we're clear, no playthrough of the game is going to be the same. Every dungeon is randomly generated, so you may get a layout completely different to what you see on screen, or even on some playthroughs of the game. Some layouts are simple and easy, while others can genuinely screw you in getting treasures, and believe me, it's happened before. Trust me. It happens to the best of us. Also note that these dungeons can typically be done in any order after the third, although there is a set list of what dungeons do in order, so don't think that you need to do these in the order I say in the video. With all being said, let's begin. This list will have spoilers at some point in it, so if you have not played for Pikmin 2 yet, or if you have and you haven't beaten basically the 10,000 or the 100,000 Poco limit, well then you're basically, I think it's 10,000 or 100,000, either way, if you've not beat that Poco limit, I would suggest turning off this video now, as this video does basically spoil the entire game at some point, or to some degree. So as a warning, do put the video off and play the game, please. You have been warned. There will be another warning when it needs to be said, basically. There's no surprise that the Emergence Cave is dead last. It's a beginner's cave. It doesn't have challenging enemies, nor does it have many floors, with it only having 2. There's not much going for this cave, and as an introduction to the cave system is a bit of a shame, as it doesn't give a lot to talk about. But it makes sense as to why this cave is last on the list, and that's because it's a one-time cave. It doesn't have a boss at the end of the cave, nor any real reason to come back to it. The only probable reason is to have an easy access to gain purple Pikmin, which are very useful later on in the game. Much like the Emergence Cave, the White Flower Garden is also an early game cave. However, unlike the Emergence Cave, there is a significant rise in difficulty. However, it's not a massive rise. There's one extra floor than the Emergence Cave and deadlier enemies, and even a boss known as the Burrowing Staggerhele. However, I'm not a big fan of the Burrowing Staggerhele. In my opinion, the Burrowing Staggerhele is one of the worst bosses in Pikmin 2. And this place also introduces whites, but really that doesn't help much in its favour. The vital treasure, the 5-man knapsack, is also the most useless upgrade in the game, as it only lets you lay down and rest. It is only used in some of the secrets where the Pikmin will carry you to the onions and it will lift you up and have you bonk you on your head. Realistically, this dungeon was very easy to rank on this list, considering the fact that A, it's an early dungeon or cave, and B, it's also very boring. But hopefully these next few will not be boring. I absolutely despise the Glutton's Kitchen, and yet I find it better than the last two dungeons we talked about. For an early game cave and its cutesy and almost kid-like appearance, you'd think the dungeon would be easy. But oh boy, you cannot be any more wrong. The Glutton's Kitchen is filled to the brim with dangerous enemies, cannon beetle larvas, anode beetles, cloaking burrow knit, and there's even a spotty bullbear on one of the floors. Bullbears, if you weren't aware, by the way, after being killed can... Hold on, sorry, come closer so you can hear this, right? Did I mention that they come back to life if you kill them? If you do not take them back to the ship, they come back and they eat whatever Pikmin are in the area. And then to end off the cave, you have the most pointless boss to even be considered a boss. The giant bread bug is by far the easiest boss in the game, only taking 2 hits to actually beat. You must drag it as it's carrying stuff to its den and pull it to the ship. There it will fly up, hit its head, and end up dying from the head injuries it now has. The only thing giving this cave points above the others is the appearance of the different floors. Some have very cute, almost like these like toy brick layouts and like sort of toy train sort of aesthetic with like the floor being drawn on and stuff. And also the treasures here are also pretty interesting and pretty fun. Like the sulking antenna, which is a massive treasure yet shrunken down in the viewing section where after you collect it, it lets you view it, and that's where it gets the name, and you know what I mean. The dream material, which is also the boss treasure, makes the captains impervious to electricity, which is actually quite useful, because electricity is instant kill in Pikmin 2. Not to captains, but to Pikmin it is, but even still, having immunity to electricity is incredible to have. The Staggerhele, in my opinion, is the most annoying cave in the game, though that's not to say it's the worst. It's technically the last dungeon you take on in the Awakening Wood, and it kinda shows why. Even getting to the entrance is a pain. You gotta build some bridges that are over the water, deal with 2 yellow wollywogs that are in the water as well, and then even after all that, there's a burrowing snagger outside the entrance. I do like this dungeon that is placed in the same area where the original snagger boss was in Pikmin 1. The dungeon itself isn't too bad for the most part. It has some annoying enemies like the orange bulbs and the antenna beetles, which can steal your Pikmin and lead your Pikmin to danger, but they can be easy to take out if you know what you're doing. Then there's the mass amount of burrowing snaggerets planted around the cave. There is at least, and I kid you not, 4 to 5 burrowing snaggerets within this dungeon. And I'm pretty sure, if my memory serves me correct, this dungeon is like 5 to 6 floors. And that's not even the boss of the dungeon. Pileated Snaggeret. This is a Snaggeret that grew a foot and said, "Hey, I have mad hops now." This thing is even more annoying than the regular Snaggerets. It's bigger, more mobile, and can eat more Pikmin at the same time. Wonderful. The upgrade you get is also pretty solid. The Justice Alloy allows you to take less damage from any, enemy attacks, so whether you got chomped on or stomped or crushed by something, you would take less damage, which is very useful considering how squishy the captains were before getting this upgrade. The Tower Room is a weird dungeon, to say the least. It's the 10th dungeon in the entire game, which makes no sense to me because how easy this dungeon is. It's not hard by any means, though it has difficult enemies to say the least, or at least annoying ones. I guess you could argue that some of the enemies are a lot tougher than the other dungeons, though not many, though most of the dweevils, some doodle bugs and jelly floats, which don't even kill Pikmin, by the way, and with the occasional orange bulbulbs and wollywogs. The treasure found here are based off of bathroom and kitchen utensils. You could find a bar of soap known as the Sud Generator on a rubber duck known as a Rubber Ugly. Those are hilarious treasure names, by the way. The boss of the shower room is known as the Ranging Bloister, I'm pretty sure, if my memory serves me correct. This boss is kind of a trick boss, really. Well, it's not a trick, but it has a gimmick to it. This thing does not target Pikmin. It targets captains. So whatever captain you're using, it will lock onto that captain, and it will basically be like, I want to follow you and eat whatever is around you, including you. Meaning you have to have one captain on its own, preferably in some sort of isolated area, maybe like a hallway or something where the Bloister gets trapped, and your other captain must have the rest of your Pikmin behind the Bloister, because it can only take damage, or at least significant damage, if you're attacking the weird tail thing on its back. So meaning you have to swap back and forth between captains in order to actually beat the damn thing. It's not a bad boss by any means, it's just a bit tedious and can be easy, especially if you have the spicy spray, which is what I like to call Pikmin drugs. You guys like spiders? I don't. And the Citadel of Spiders is filled with them. Not just one or two, it is filled to the brim with dweevils and all sorts of arachnids. No, and they're not creepy like regular spiders are in real life, thankfully. However, the Citadel of Spiders has a lot more than you may think and you may want. Considering the fact that these spiders are twice the size of, well, Olimar, basically. It's safe to say that I'm grateful that these kind of spiders don't exist, because I'd be terrified. The Citadel of Spiders is not the hardest dungeon in the game, however, it's the 4th dungeon, meaning at this point you will have yellow Pikmin, which are impervious to lightning and can be thrown quite high. There's a reason why this is the 4th dungeon in the game. Considering after you beat the White Flower Garden, you immediately come back here, well, come to the Protected Pool, get yellows, go to the Citadel of Spiders, and take out whatever, I guess, treasure you can find here. The boss of this dungeon, should I say, is the Beady Longlegs, an old classic from the first game, turned into the absolute piss take it is thanks to Pikmin drugs. And of course, yellows demolish Beady Longlegs in a second. And the treasure you get from taking on Beady Longlegs is known as the key. That's it, just the key. It unlocks challenge mode, which basically allows you to take on dungeons that have a few challenging aspects to it, such as the fact that you can fight 2 of the same bosses at the same time, on the same floor. If you know what I'm talking about, oh boy, you poor saps, if you know what I'm talking about. That challenge was not good. It was not. Surprisingly, the Hall of Beasts, being the 2nd dungeon in the game, actually ranks its way up into the 8th spot. Which is fairly surprising, but at the same time not, because this dungeon is actually quite fun. This dungeon is filled with old-timely and very vintage-like game sort of technology or card games and stuff. Like, you have a mahjong piece, you have a card from the original, or like the Nintendo card game that they sold many years ago. You have an old, a very old and rusted D-pad. You have a... oh god, what else? You have a floppy disk. You had the... I can't remember what else there was, but I remember there was a lot of just vintage stuff. And there was a very, very nice, like, early game cave it was. It wasn't too challenging. It was filled with bulbs, considering the fact that the final boss of that dungeon, the Empress Bulblax, and trust me, we will talk more about her soon, the queen of the bulbs, if you will. She is a very interesting boss that ends up being not too difficult, but it has a multiple cycles of, you know, you attack, she shakes off, rolls about, comes back, you attack, rinse, and repeat. The whole entire dungeon is basically to have you obtain the treasure gate, which is the most important item in the game. It allows you to find treasure that's nearby, whether that being underground, or, you know, just right next to you in plain sight, or really high up where you cannot see normally. This dungeon, again, just like the Emergence Cave, is an introductory cave, just 10 times better than what the Emergence Cave is. The Frontier Cavern is the Christmas cave, if you could even call it that. Yes, it has a lot of Christmassy related items, but realistically, that's all this is. This cavern is very, very long and very challenging as well, considering the fact that it's in the Valley of Repose, which has technically 2 of the hardest dungeons in the game, in my opinion. Or at least dungeons you can get in the early game. They are very challenging. And this one is no different. This whole area is filled to the brim with powerful enemies, such as the decorated cannon beetles, the regular cannon beetles and even bulbears and orange bulbs, and even snowy bulbs. All of which are tough to take out. Well, not too tough, though. However, the main focus on this dungeon is, again, just like the Hall of Beasts, the Empress Bulblax. However, this time she has a bit of a new feature, or new gimmick. Yeah, she kind of gives birth to new bulbs during the fight. It's gross, The whole thing with this gimmick is that you need to have one captain behind the Empress Bulblax next to the... Yep, they put it in the game, unfortunately. And you have to have the captain that's behind her basically attack any of the bulb lavas that come out. Although, to be fair, most of those bulb lavas would be crushed by the Empress Bulblax as she's rolling about, but, you know, it's not really ideal, considering the fact, you know, that's a bit gruesome, if you ask me. The running shoes that you get in this dungeon as well from the Empress Bulblax are also fairly pointless. You just get a bit of a speed increase to your captains, which are okay. It's pretty good, however, it makes every one of your Pikmin 10 times slower. Well, not 10 times slower, but like twice as slow as you. Which can be a pain, especially with purple Pikmin as well, because they don't get those upgrades. You do as the captain. Coming in at number 6, we have the Bulblax Kingdom. This cave immediately already has the best theme out of any of the caves. So, like, knightly and so like, medieval and stuff. This is also a theme, because there was a long time ago I had a character for D&D that we were like asked, hey, let's have theme songs or like theme tunes or backing themes for these characters. The Ball Black's Kingdom theme is what I used for my character. But of course, either way, the Ball Black's Kingdom, again, just like the Hall of Beasts, is filled with ball blackses. You probably could have guessed that, but by the name of it. However, the Empress Ball Blacks is not the final, well, not the boss of this area. That would go to the Emperor Ball Blacks, who was the final boss of Pikmin 1. Keep that in mind for a minute, okay? The Emperor Ball Blacks being the final boss. It's a giant emperor of the Ball Bulb, the most powerful Ball Bulb to even exist. You must think that it is a complete joke. It's a joke. Purple Pikmin absolutely destroy the Emperor Ball Blacks. And that is also thanks to Pikmin drugs. The Emperor Ball Blacks drops the Scorch Guard, which is an item that is used similarly to the Justice Alloy or the Dream Material, where it allows you to be impervious to fire. Makes sense, called the Scorch Guard. However, there is also another upgrade item in this dungeon, or at least I believe it's... or it could be in another dungeon, I don't know. That's called the Brute Knuckles, which is dropped by a Mimuta, which is an enemy that was once a boss, now turned into a gentle, loving giant. The Hall of Heroes is the boss rush of the game. Essentially, with every cave there is, you would expect there to be some sort of cave that has multiple bosses in it. And this is the exact one. The Hall of Heroes is the longest dungeon, having 15 floors in total, and having 9 unique boss enemies. These bosses are the Burrowing Staggerhele, the Beady Longlegs, Emperor and Empress Ball Blacks, Affiliated Staggerhele, the Ranging Bloister, and 2 bosses we have not talked about. Well, technically, we haven't talked about it yet. The final boss of this dungeon is called the Raging Longlegs, and even with Pikmin drugs, this thing is a hard boss to take out. It's got a lot of HP, it tanks hits, and quite literally, it's actually one of the more tougher bosses in the game. It's a Beady Longlegs, which much larger feet, but bigger hitbox as well, so making it a little bit more easier to hit. This dungeon isn't the best in my opinion, however, I will say I do love the amount of nostalgia when it comes to the Rob, Rob the robot, and it's like the blocks that you get with it, or the like little cylinder things, the things that you get to build up Rob, essentially. And I do admit that the boss rush aspect does I do quite like it quite a bit. However, it's a bit, much. This is also one of the hardest dungeons in the game, being one of the last 3 you would ever take on. However, it's not the final dungeon. That would go to, not the one that we're talking about next, but the one after that. Or maybe it's number 1, I don't know. Well, I do know it's my list, what am I saying? Subterranean Complex is number 4. Was that a mouthful for you? Was it? Oh, I hope it was, because it was for me. So let's move on from that. This cave is very, very rusty, very metallic, very technological, if you will. You can see that from not only the aesthetic of the actual dungeon itself, but also the treasure you get from it. A lot of old-timey gadgets and gizmos, telephone dials to gears to springs, you know, all sorts of like anodes and stuff, and like sort of like, you know, other dials and stuff, and like almost like parts from like phones and stuff. It's you know, it's a very metallic feel to it, you know, and considering the fact that this place is called the Subterranean Complex, it makes sense, and I do really love the rusted, you know, appearance of the place. I do love the whole overall aesthetic. The boss of this dungeon is a boss that's also in the Hall of Heroes, the one that we didn't talk about, which is the Man at Legs. I absolutely love this thing. The Man at Legs is one of my top 3 favorite bosses in this game. It is a arachnoid like the Beady Longlegs or the Raging Longlegs, except it's a robot. And with robots, you get, well, you know, just the odd machine gun added to it. And even with the Pikmin drugs, it's still a hard boss to take out, considering the fact that you need to be on your toes at every point in the fight. If you hide behind something, you're pretty much fine. However, if you're in its line of sight, good luck, because if you do not have those special items with you, the Pikmin drugs, you are not going to have a fun time with this thing. The item, or I guess the treasure you get from being it, is also called, I believe, the Stellar Orb, which is a very useful item, especially for one of the dungeons that we're going to be talking about much later. However, and considering the fact that this dungeon is meant to be done before that dungeon, however, it's also meant to be done before the shower room, which makes no sense. No, the rest of the dungeons make sense, however, the shower room is just the most out of place, you know, dungeon. I feel like if you swap this one with the Subterranean Complex, and then swap that one with the Frontier Cavern, so make the Frontier Cavern the 9th dungeon in the game, it would make sense, you know, I feel like that would make more sense. But it doesn't, so. This next dungeon is to be the spoiler dungeon of the entire game. Believe me when I say this now, I do not want to spoil anyone, so if you are basically at this point in the game, or not, I would suggest turning off the video now and make sure to play through the entire game in order to know what goes on within this part of at this point in the game. Sounds good? Well, let's go with it. The Dream Den is the final dungeon of the game. It's the second longest dungeon, being 14 floors, and the utmost hardest dungeon in the entire game. People argue if the Hall of Heroes or the other dungeon in the Wistful Wilds, or even the Dream Den are the hardest, and yes, they are all hard in their own respective right. However, considering the fact that you need to go through 14 floors worth of hell, including the boss of the final floor, not only that, getting through the floors with 100 Pikmin can be quite challenging. The Dream Den doesn't really have a theme going on, however, what it does have is an absolute load of bullshit. Yes, I'm saying bullshit like it's a bad thing, but it's actually not. It's actually a really good thing, because it brings a really good challenge to the final dungeon, and that makes sense. The final dungeon should be challenging, and it should have insanely powerful traps, such as the ball bear trap it has. If you don't know what I mean, the ball bear trap, the infamous ball bear trap, and something that has probably gotten everyone, is basically a trap where the spotty ball bear, you remember the things I've talked about earlier, which, come back to life, it falls from the ceiling on top of you and your entire squadron of Pikmin when you're not prepared for it. The easiest way to deal with this is just to grab one singular Pikmin, such as a white Pikmin for example, lead it to the Bulbear, have it activate the trap, and basically let the Bulbear fall off the cliff. Because it's in a, a very rusted area where there's a lot of holes and stuff, and like it can, it can easily travel up the ledge, I guess. This allows you to not only bypass the fact that this thing could come back to life, but also allows you to basically collect the treasure without any worries. The final boss, known as the Titan Dweevil, is probably one of the best final bosses in Pikmin history. Yes, you can say the Emperor Bulwarks or the Sire Hound is better, but I prefer the Titan Dweevil. The Titan Dweevil has 4 weapons on its body at the start of the fight, having the Flare Cannon, the Shock Therapist, the Monster Pump, and the Comedy Bomb. These will then turn into treasures after you break them off his body. They're not broken, they're just malfunctioned enough to the point where you can easily take them back to the ship. The Dream Den then is topped off with a final fight with the gentle creature known as the Titan Dweevil, which makes no sense. Now, I will make a video on the Titan Dweevil itself and Louis. Good old Louis. However, Louis, for those of you who are not, for those of you who have not played through the entirety of the game, Louis was basically left behind accidentally, quote unquote, and then was, found, almost looks like it was controlling the Titan Dweevil. And then, obviously, after being the Titan Dweevil, we are able to obtain Louis as the final treasure of the game, known as the King of Bugs. How ominous. Here we have it, the top 2 dungeons. These two were hard to rank together, considering the fact that they're both amazing dungeons. However, there is one thing that leads the number 1 cavern, or the number 1 castle, should I say, to be at number 1. However, I can safely say that the number 2 spot goes to the Submerged Castle. Now, I know what you guys are thinking, I know, but the Submerged Castle is one of the best things that no other dungeon does, and yes, I completely agree with you. The Submerged Castle is amazing for the fact that it's so eerie and actually gets you to be scared of an area, of an actual cavern. For those of you who have not played through the game, nor have you played through this dungeon in particular, or have not even been on the internet enough to, know what this place is, the Submerged Castle is home to the most infamous and most fear-inducing enemy in Pikmin history. The Water Wraith. The Water Wraith is a invincible, at first, boss enemy that basically chases you around the entirety of the map, or of the cave, should I say. Every level that you are on, minus the first one, I'm pretty sure, but I'm pretty sure they changed that in the remake. I think. I could be wrong, though. The Water Wraith basically instant kills Pikmin, is instant kill to the captain, I'm pretty sure, cannot be attacked by any Pikmin, and is completely homing. It is not killable, at least for the most part, and it is not even... It only takes a few minutes for it to even start up, because usually at the beginning of every sub-level, it's like a moment of calm. You have the calm before the storm, and then the storm arrives and it's like, oh fuck. It's a massive clusterfuck of what the fuck am I supposed to do now? The item that you also get from being the Water Wraith after you find out its weakness, being purple Pikmin, or at least the thud sounds that the purple Pikmin make. After you beat the water wraith, you tear off, or you break the steamrollers that it has on its body, break those off, and then it basically runs around like a headless chicken, scared of shitless of you. And essentially when you break, the water wraith itself, it drops the best item in the game, in my opinion, minus the, treasure gauge. You get the Pluckaphone. And the Pluckaphone allows you to use your whistle to pluck any Pikmin. No matter where, well, obviously it's, as long as it's in the circle, as long as your cursor's over it and it's able to be plucked, you can basically pluck any as much as 100 Pikmin at the same time. You don't need to use the A button at all anymore. And that's why it's so good, because it takes up more time to use A than to use the Pluckaphone, and that's why it's so good. Submerged Castle gets points for atmosphere, for the fear-inducing ride that this whole entire cave was. The boss itself being a massive pain in the ass throughout the entire dungeon. Then to have it be like, we're gonna flip the script and we're gonna make you scared of us now. To then getting the best item in the game gives it points. But there's one reason why I like the next dungeon a bit more. Number one goes to the Cavern of Chaos. The first dungeon you would take on the Wistful Wilds, and big step up from what you're pretty much used to at this point. The Cavern of Chaos, much like the other dungeons in the Wistful Wild, take the difficulty scale up to 1,000 by this point. It has all sorts of traps like rock slides, bomb rocks, and, ton of stuff. It even has some of the most notoriously difficult enemies in the game, such as Gatling Groinks and whatnot. Again, much like the Bull Bears, should I say, the Gatling Groink is also notorious for coming back to life. If one of them wasn't enough. And one of the treasures in this cavern, will you say, in one of the last sub-levels. It's one of the funniest items, one of the funniest treasures to ever exist. The Maternal Sculpture. And it's the ball cap, or the little... How do I say this without getting demonetized? Well, not demonetized, because I'm not even monetized at this point. But how do I say this without being extremely graphic? The bottle, the lid of a baby's bottle, the thing that the baby sucks on when it, you know what I mean? The nipple, should I say? God's sake. Gosh. And then with Olimar's entry of that treasure, it says, it resembles a mammal appendage, but I have no idea what it actually does. Now, that can mean one of many things, but we're gonna avoid that. The actual cave itself also has a treasure that hints to the boss of the dungeon, known as the Mysterious Remains. The ship basically says that the remains were from some sort of beast or crustacean that lived in this cave, and when we get to the end of the cave, we find out that that crustacean still lives here, and that crustacean is missing a claw. That boss is called the Segmented Crobster, or Crobster, something like that, I don't know. But segmented means that it's basically missing a segment of its body. The Mysterious Remains, should I say. The Segmented Crobster basically is the best boss in the game, in my opinion. It rolls around and when it hits the wall, it causes rocks to slide. Then you must use whatever Pikmin you have available to you and attack its underbelly, which is a beautiful rainbow coloration to it. And the segmented Crobster is my favorite boss in Pikmin 2, and it's one of the best bosses to even exist in Pikmin history. And that is why the Cavern of Chaos is my personal favorite dungeon out of Pikmin 2. And there you have it. Those are that is my ranking of the Pikmin 2 dungeons. Yes, you guys may not agree with some of the rankings on this list, and believe me, I know, people have more bias to certain dungeons compared to others, and believe me, you are more welcome to share your opinion. Just be more respectful of everyone that, either disagrees with you or doesn't. Like I say in many of my like I said in one of my videos, I always say that, opinions are subjective, and you need to respect the ones that people make out and people bring out to the world. So with all that being said, I'm the Crimson Scythe. I'll see you all in the next video. See you guys then.